The Rise and Shine podcast series is made possible by the generous support of Bonnie Vozar of Chicago, Illinois.
The sage's command that a person should honor their spouse more than themselves. This is like the most annoying teaching of all time because I cannot honor the person who loads the dishwasher incorrectly. You know what I like even more than being right is being happy. You're going to fold the laundry and I'm going to load the dishwasher.
This is Rise and Shine, a podcast that offers timeless wisdom and uplifting meditations to fill your heart, feed your soul, and start your day on a positive note. Here is Adrienne Gold Davis.
It took me a very long time to figure out how to establish peace in my home. So long, in fact, that our nest was almost empty before I managed to hit that sweet spot. But fear not, it is never too late to model these traits, even for your adult children, and God willing, one day your grandchildren. Because between my stubborn, controlling nature and my husband's creative responses to my micromanaging, everyone in our household revolved around my moods and my emotional whims. My eldest son was actually able to forewarn his 4-year-old brother one morning. We were in carpool, and I heard him lean over and stage whisper to his little brother. He goes, "Shh, just be quiet. Don't talk now. She's in a mood." I remember the shame that washed over me as I realized I was being handled by a 7-year-old. And I also remember thinking, why does he get it and my husband doesn't? So my lack of impulse control and my tendency towards responding with anger instead of sadness, which was usually what I was really feeling, that was another. I had a lot to work on and to change and to evolve in order to make my household function more peacefully. And while others in my house had their own role to play in the bedlam, you got to swallow that jagged little pill of truth and know that the only thing you can truly change is yourself, is your reaction to others, and even your reaction to your own thoughts. But there are hacks along the way that work to bring peace and balance, even if you are 100% faking it before making it. And while Judaism eschews hypocrisy or false representation of self, it does celebrate the capacity to act as if in order to improve one's character, in order to pursue peace. You know, the most famous biblical example would be Moses' brother Aaron, who was known as a master of creating peace. In Hebrew, he was called Rodef Shalom, a pursuer of peace. And even he sometimes manipulated and massaged the truth in order to bring peace between one person to another. So whether in your home or in your office, with your family, your coworkers, there are two simple words that when given over calmly and with conviction are often the roadmap to peace. And those words are, I'm sorry. And what's more, you need to learn to apologize sometimes, even when you are in the wrong, because practice saying, oops, I blew it, or wow, I sure got that wrong, in order to prepare yourself for the moments you'll really need to say them, helps you know that sometimes you can win the battle, but lose the war. Valuing peace over the moral superiority of being right is a gift you give yourself. And apologizing doesn't always mean that you're wrong and the other person is right. It can mean, as the saying goes, that you value your relationship more than your ego. So the amazing, amazing Jessica Berkowitz is joining me again today to unpack the principles of peace in the home through a Jewish lens that can give you the insights and wisdom to build the kind of home you want to live in and for your children to one day emulate. Jessica Minnen Berkowitz is a writer, a ritualist, a liturgist, committed to the discipline of delight. Before Momentum, she was part of the founding team at One Table, where she was director of Jewish learning for many years. She's a sought-out educator who has taught around the world, Hillels, federations, JCCs, foundations for summer camps for Jews, Birthright. among so many others. Originally from Paducah, Kentucky, she's an alumna of Washington University in St. Louis, Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies, the European Institute for Jewish Studies in Sweden. She went to Baltimore Hebrew University. She got rabbinic ordination at the Jewish Theological Seminary. She's a past fellow of so many places. She and her family live in Denver, Colorado. Welcome back, my sweet Jessica.
Adrienne, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's just, I gain and benefit so much from your incredible wisdom. So I think we'll do as, I think it was, who was it who said the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms? I think Socrates. I want you to define Shalom Bayit through a Jewish lens and help us get some tools and principles so that we can live that definition.
Okay, so let's do the very, very literal shalom, peace. Also coming from the root shlemut, wholeness. So the idea that the very definition of peace in Judaism, of wholeness, requires us to understand that there has been or there is the potential for a fracturing. Because in order to be made whole, something has the potential to be broken. So very, very quickly, just in the definition, we're understanding that peace implies brokenness, that these things are in tandem, that wholeness implies the ability to have been separated into pieces. Okay. And then bayit, literally house or home. And so put together, Shalom Bayit is a way of understanding conceptually a kind of peace and wholeness that's taking place specifically in the bayit, the home. And for our purposes, understanding we're not talking structurally about a house. There's a difference between a house and a home. And in this phrase, we are specifically talking about the inhabited space, not the structure itself. We're talking about the place that we inhabit, whether it's an apartment or a home or a caravan or whatever, that it's the place that we inhabit with our family.
Right. So why do you think the expression Shalom Bayit is often exclusively referred to as between spouses?
Well, I think what ends up happening is for many of us in relationships, that our relationship or partnership becomes a sort of centrifugal force around which all of our other relationships depend and rotate. So when things are right with our partner, it manifests outward, and we tend to have stronger relationships with our children and strong relationships in our jobs and with our friends. And when things are unbalanced or not feeling particularly good and healthy with our partner, that manifests outward as well. And, our partner, we can understand this in a lot of different ways. It could be our husband or our wife or our life partner or our co-parent, the person with whom we are building home.
Okay, what does that mean? Building home. I'm gonna let you wax poetic about that. What does it mean to build home?
I will say that I think Judaism does this very well in that it really separates quite clearly for us the idea of personal space and public space, and that the home within the home is considered our personal space. Has different laws associated with it. You can do things and say things differently within that space than you can outside of the space. And I think from a practical perspective, if it's the place where you feel most comfortable, most relaxed, most seen, also where your emotions are most available to you. At the moment we step out of that space, we tend to cover ourselves in different ways, literally, but also cover ourselves in different ways emotionally. We don't express ourselves the same way outside of the home as we do in the home. We dress differently, we behave differently. And so there's a lot of sort of sociological implications here. So I love the idea of understanding this inner space, this bayit space, as a place in which we must pursue shalom because it's the space in some ways in which shalom or wholeness is most at risk. Because who are the people we say, I hate you to?
Right. Right. Our siblings.
Right.
One.
The people we love the most in so many ways are the people we treat the worst.
So, let me just ask you something based on what you just said. And this is perhaps turning it on its head, but it seems to me that if your home is your most important space, if it's the place where you love the most, then perhaps we should be using the behaviors that we use outside of the house in the house. Maybe what we should do is examine why it is we save our worst behavior for inside the house, and consider that when we come home at the end of the day, that we should be our best selves. Yes, be yourself. I just want to be myself. Okay, be yourself, but be your best, your better self. Why have we inverted that model?
I think it has to do with the way that we love, and the unconditional love that we tend to show to our family. And I said this to my daughter, what would our relationship be like if you treated me the way you treat the librarian and your teacher? And people will say your daughter is amazing. She is so sweet. She is so polite. I'm like, who are you working with here? Because that's a different kid than the one I'm living with. And I'm sure my mother said that plenty of times about me. And it's also, I get her most creative. I get her purest self-expression. So I get both of those things. And I think it's because she feels the safest with me to show her pain and her rougher edges and her rougher side. And all of it in the same thing, like I'm not married, I'm divorced. And so sometimes I feel like Shalom Bayit conversations are really hard for me because they're about having a partner in the home, and I don't have a partner in the home. And so what do we do when we don't have that? And how do we shape that? It's like, well, we're in relationship with ourselves. That's a partnership. We're in relationship with God. That's a partnership. We're in relationship with our children. Those are different kinds of partnerships. So Shalom Bayit is really powerful and meaningful, whatever kinds of relationships you're dealing with at home, even if you live alone.
Yeah, I know 100%. And I really, this is the momentum way of looking at it. It's a much more holistic approach. And it doesn't matter what your home looks like. I want to come back to this principle you were talking about with your daughter and the librarian, for example. I remember my kids used to come home from the school bus and they would lose it like maniacs. And I remember the teacher saying, well, they were behaving well the whole day outside in the world, and they come home and they act out because they feel the safest there. And I wanted to say, thank you very much. That's not okay. I do understand what you're saying, that it's correct. But you know what? Sometimes spouses excuse bad behavior in this way. I guess I'm trying to understand if something is natural, like perhaps acting out more, getting the best and the worst of somebody when you're in your safest place. Don't there still need to be guardrails in the home that are even higher than the ones that are in the outside world? And can you think of a few ways, either by modeling it or by setting boundaries around behavior, where you can have a peaceful home by design?
Absolutely. And I think our classic canonical sources are going to set us up with some of those tools. And one is, I used to volunteer for JACS, which is the Jewish Addiction and Counseling Service. And one of the things we taught recovering addicts and alcoholics is this idea of, I'd rather be happy than right. And asking yourself this question of, why are we acting out? What are we arguing about? What are the rifts about that are disrupting our potential for shlemut, our potential for wholeness? And there's a beautiful teaching in our sources that says that most conflict in the world comes from not anger, but arrogance. That peace requires valuing a relationship more than being right, valuing a relationship more than any kind of moral superiority. So that one way we can model this for our children is to admit that we might be wrong, to admit, and this is even harder, that both of us might be right. That
Wow.
I know that's really hard because I like to be right. You know what I like even more than being right is being happy. That I want a home life that's happy even more than I want to win this argument or die on this hill about whatever the point is. So that's one tool, is to think to ourselves, I'd rather be happy than right. And how can I channel all of us have this propensity towards arrogance, towards devaluing relationships in order to win the argument. And that's one tool.
Wow. It's interesting. I'm thinking back to a meme that I saw on the great, digital rabbi Facebook years ago that said, let me get this right. It said, sometimes the hardest apology you'll ever have to accept is the one you will never receive.
Yeah.
To me, that was really powerful because, if you are waiting for an apology to have peace in your home, you may never get that apology, not from your kid, not from a spouse, not from anyone. And I think that preferring happy or peace over being right can also apply to that. But as the mother, as the person who models, hopefully, whose chinuch, whose dedication is to teach your children how to, work on your character traits. I think it's interesting that today mothers have to model apologizing and forgiveness out loud, more than they ever did in, for example, my mother's generation, who never said, I'm sorry, I blew it, I shouldn't have yelled at you. So many of us who were parented by older generations feel that somehow we're diminishing our power as mothers when we apologize to our own children. Can you speak to that?
Wow. I just want to acknowledge how the sort of emotional response I just have to the idea of when I heard my own mother apologize and when I didn't, and how she was raised and the trauma she inherited, and the ways in which we can say this far but no farther in terms of parenting mistakes that our parents have made. And then also to acknowledge our own parenting mistakes in real time with our children. So one thing I do is open myself up as a mother to saying relatively constantly. I feel like I'm saying it all the time. I made a mistake. Mommy could have done that better. Let's have a conversation about this. Let's slow down. Let's slow down the conversation. There's a beautiful line in Jewish wisdom that says that when you become angry, the first thing to depart from you is your wisdom. So like we all feel like we have lots of tools and we read all the parenting books and we have a great, relationship counselor. And yet in the moment when the anger is rising and flaring, the wisdom immediately departs from us.
Yeah, it says that when you're angry, it's like the neshama cannot bear to be in the body, and it leaves a portal where, all kinds of evil things can enter. What about, let's say you're working on that. Let's say there's two parents in the home and one is working on that and the other is not. Can you change up the dance to make peace if only one person is doing the work?
Rambam has this teaching that I can't stand, so which means it must be meaningful for me. If you ever find a teaching that really gets under your skin, that's the one you should hone in on. But the Rambam, who was a medieval philosopher, says that the sages command that a person should honor their spouse more than themselves. Yes. This is like the most annoying teaching of all time. Because I cannot honor the person who loads the dishwasher incorrectly, even after we've had 15 conversations about how if you put the bowls on the bottom facing down, the jets can't get up to reach and clean the dishes on the top shelf. How are you supposed to honor this person? And I think what Rambam is actually getting at, and the reason I have ended up loving this teaching, is that ultimately, Shalom Bayit's not like a bonus value. It's a commanded behavior. It's tzivah. It's a mitzvah. So
Uh-huh.
even when it runs counter to our instinct and counter to our ego, to honor what our partner is going through, to honor their foibles and their mistakes, to say, honey, can you just come over here one more time so I can show you how the dishwasher works? Or simply to say, and I know that this is a tricky one, this isn't the hill. This isn't the fight.
Right.
You're really good at matching the socks, and I can't handle matching the socks. You're going to fold the laundry, and I'm going to load the dishwasher, right? And doing what we can to alleviate the circumstances for the fracture before it even happens. And if you're with someone who's not even in the space where they can seek, they're not a Rodef Shalom yet.
Right.
Well, you mentioned this verse about Aaron, that he was a Rodef Shalom, but what does it say before he was a Rodef Shalom, a seeker of peace? It says he was an Ohef Shalom.
Yeah.
So before someone can
You better translate that. Oh,
before someone can do the work of seeking peace, they have to want it. They have to love it. So to sit down with your partner and say, I can see that your actions aren't showing me that this isn't something you want to take actions. Could you tell me just what you would love? Like, what would you love to have happen in our relationship or in our parenting? And sometimes by articulating the Ohav Shalom, the loving of peace, allows you to start seeing the pathways for Rodef Shalom to pursue.
Jessica, you are so correct, because otherwise, most of the time in our households, all we are doing is manifesting behavior from our own childhoods. We are, following an unconscious path around all kinds of things that bug us when we're not really clear what peace would look like for us. So I would say that if peace is an obligation, if loving peace and pursuing peace, pursuing this Rodef peace, this searching after something is so important, first you're going to have to be able to define it. And maybe that means you sit down in a family meeting, whether it's you and your kids, you and your spouse and your kids, you and your spouse, whomever it is, and saying, what would a peaceful house look like? And which part of creating peace would make you the happiest holding up your end of it? Because just like we're all going to, load the dishwasher properly, and I always put the bowls on the bottom. And I'm sorry, Jessica, but that's it. We're not living together.
No, that's it, Adrienne. There goes our dream.
There goes our luck. Seriously, I know. Do you know how I made peace with my husband in my house? I've been married 38 years. I have some wisdom here. It's going to sound so ridiculous, but I hope you will understand this. My husband was, in my mind, always late. I'd say, what time are you coming home? He'd say, what time do you need me home? I'd say 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock had come, he wasn't there. 6:30, he wasn't there. 7, he wasn't there. Now, not only is he late, but he's a liar. Okay? So, this is where I would lead to it. And then he'd come home and I would punish him so badly with my attitude and the slamming of my doors and, all of that stuff, that the next day, instead of coming home at 6, he'd come home at 9, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we went to therapy and we worked it out. And one of the things that I came to understand is that when I was growing up, my father came home every day at 6. And in my mind, that's what men did. They'd come home at 6. And everything was geared around that. What I understood and found out in that therapy session was that my father-in-law didn't come home until all his work was finished. And he had 5 children's mouths to feed. That my mother-in-law, may she rest in peace, used to hold dinner for him to get home, whatever time he got home. And she would take care of the kids and put them all to bed. And when he walked in the door, so that was what a woman looked like in his family. And that's what a man and woman looked like in my family. And I was furious because my unconscious need to replicate where I came from, for better or for worse, made me angry. And I decided that my husband was no longer late. He just wasn't home yet. He just wasn't home yet. And I stopped asking, when he going to be home?
Wow, that's so powerful. It's the story that illustrates, I think, my favorite teaching about about peace, about shalom, about wholeness and shlemut, which is from Vayikra Rabbah, which is a story in which Hashem is looking for vessels that can hold brachot, that can hold blessing. And so the teaching says that the Holy One could find no vessel that holds blessing except peace.
Mm.
And what we learn from this is that peace is not the reward for having it all figured out. You don't do all the therapy and check off all the boxes and peace is the reward. Peace is actually the condition that allows for anything good and for any blessings to endure in your life. You have the tools, you have to figure out how to do the assembling, right? Peace is not the reward, it's the condition. When you put the pieces together, when you reassemble, when you seek that shlemut, the reward is the vessel that allows you to hold blessing. And for you, this blessing of realizing, oh, he's not late, he's just not home yet. What a bracha. It's incredible.
Because timing was not his way of adding to Shalom Bayit.
Right.
He is not able to assess it or determine it or stick to it. So why would I continually set him up to fail or for failure? And what I came to see from all of this is that when I stopped pushing and dying on that hill, it's interesting how much more he wanted to come home, how much faster he managed to get through his day, because he knew when he came in the front door, he wouldn't be punished for 15 minutes. And I just, my blessing for both of us is that for all of us, for everyone listening, is that we create a vessel that will contain peace, and that the Almighty will send us an abundance, shefa, blessings, health, peace, and love in order to support it.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Jessica. You're the best.
Thank you, Adrienne. You're a blessing.
Thanks for listening to Rise and Shine. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Momentum Podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Join Adrienne again next time for more timeless wisdom and uplifting meditations that fill your heart, feed your soul, and start your day on a positive note.
This podcast was made possible by the generous support of Bonnie Vozar of Chicago, Illinois. Spread the wisdom. Inspire Jewish individuals around the globe by supporting Momentum's podcasts. To sponsor, contact podcast@momentumunlimited.org. You're listening to a Momentum podcast. For unlimited inspiration, wisdom, and empowerment, visit momentumunlimited.org.